My little brother's name is Arthur. This afternoon, I pushed him into the pool. He fell in with a big splash and started making glug 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 sounds. Just when I thought he was about to drown, he managed to cry out for help and Mom and Dad came running. Mom was crying because she thought that Arthur was dead. He wasn't. The doctor came and Arthur is doing very well now. He asked for cake with jam, and even though it was 8 o'clock and past his bedtime, my mother gave it to him anyway. Arthur was very happy and very proud with all the attention he was getting. Everyone was asking questions. Mom asked him how he had fallen into the pool, and Arthur just said he slipped. It was smart of him to say that. He knows Mom hates a tattletale. The other day when I was wrapping a skipping rope around his neck, he struggled out of my grip and ran to complain to Mom. He said I'd been trying to strangle him. Mom told him he shouldn't say such things and gave him a good spanking. When Dad came home and found out what Arthur said, he was also very angry. Arthur didn't get any dessert. Then he understood. This time he knew better than to tell Mom I had pushed him into the pool. I also asked Mom if I could have cake and jam. I asked her 3 times, but she pretended not to hear me. Maybe she suspects that I was the one who pushed Arthur. Before, I was always nice and kind to Arthur because Mom and Dad spoiled me as much as they spoil him. When he got a new toy car, I got a new doll. Mom would never give Arthur cake without giving it to me as well. But last month, Mom and Dad completely changed. Now they devote all their attention to Arthur. He gets gifts all the time. It made him very big-headed. He was always a bit of a pain in the neck, but now he's insufferable. He's constantly asking for this and that. Mom and Dad always give him whatever he asks for. The only thing they scolded him was the day I tried to strangle him with a skipping rope. That was funny because, for once, it wasn't his fault. I wonder why Mom and Dad suddenly stopped loving me. It looks like I'm no longer their little girl. Whenever I kiss Mom on the cheek, she doesn't even smile. Dad is the same way. When they go for a walk, I always tag along, but they don't pay any attention to me. If I'm playing on the road or doing something dangerous, they don't even care. Arthur can be nice occasionally, but most of the time, he refuses to play with me. The other day, I asked him why Mom and Dad had become so cold to me. He looks up at me with a sly smile and refuses to answer. He did it on purpose to enrage me. That was the day that I wrapped the skipping rope around his neck. I was so mad that despite the spanking he had received, I went into his room afterward and told him that I would kill him. This afternoon, he told me that Mom and Dad and him were going to the seaside and that they weren't bringing me with him. Then he laughed and stuck out his tongue and made faces at me. So I pushed him into the pool. Arthur is sleeping now and Mom and Dad are watching TV. The skipping rope was just lying in the garden, so I picked it up. In a moment, I'll sneak into Arthur's bedroom, and this time, I won't give him a chance to scream. That way, Mom and Dad will be forced to go to the seaside without him. And after they leave, I'll go to the end of the garden and climb back into that horrible white box that they buried me in. When I dropped out of school, it wasn't easy to find work. Nobody seemed to want to hire a girl with no qualifications. I was tired of applying for jobs advertised in newspapers and on the internet without receiving any replies. One day I spotted an ad for a job that was not so tempting, but I really needed the money. The ad said they were looking for a live-in babysitter to take care of 3 young children. It said no qualifications were necessary. They just required someone young, responsible, and pretty. I called the number, and the phone was answered by a woman with a sweet and friendly voice. When I told her I was calling about the babysitting job, she hired me on the spot. She didn't even want to meet me in person first, but she said she needed me to start immediately. I was delighted. The next morning, I drove over to the house to meet the family. As soon as I got there, I saw that the house was beautiful both inside and out. You could tell that the family was wealthy. The woman and her husband greeted me with broad smiles on their faces and introduced me to their children. There were 2 boys and a girl. Sebastian was 6 years old, Damien was 5, and Lenka was 4. The kids seemed to be nice, happy, and friendly. They were always polite, never fought with each other, and never made a mess. All they did was play alone or read a book. The parents announced that they were going out to dinner and wouldn't be home until late that night. They told me the children had already been fed, so all I had to do was get them ready for bed. The mother gave me a phone number and told me to call her if there was an emergency. The father told me to make myself at home, and if I was hungry, he said I could take whatever I wanted from the refrigerator. After their parents left, the children sat down on the sofa to watch TV. They were very quiet and barely said a word. During a commercial, I was feeling a bit hungry, so I went into the kitchen to make myself a snack. As I was rummaging around in the refrigerator, I couldn't help but notice 2 large jars that were stuffed in the back of the fridge. Both of them were wrapped in plain brown paper and had a rubber band sealing the rim. I wondered what on earth could be in them. My curiosity got the better of me, so I took out one of the jars and peeled back the brown wrapper to take a little peek. It was full of long strips of fatty meat floating in a murky red liquid. I couldn't tell what kind of meat it was, but it didn't look like pork or beef. Just as I was about to put the jar back where I found it, I heard a noise behind me. It startled me so much, I banged my head on the shelf above me. When I turned around, Sebastian was standing in the doorway staring at me. "Put that back," he said. "That's not for you." The look on his eyes and the tone of his voice sent chills down my spine. "Sorry," I muttered. "I was just looking for something to eat." Sebastian didn't reply. He just stood there, staring at me. I placed the jar back in the refrigerator and shut the door. Sebastian turned around and went back to the living room. I lost my appetite, so I went and joined the children in the living room and watched cartoons with them. I was trying to not let my imagination get the better of me when the cartoons finished and the news came on. There was a story about a teenage girl who had gone missing. The police found her decomposing head in a dumpster. They said they had no idea what had happened to the rest of her. I was afraid the grisly news story would upset the children, so I changed the channel and told them it was time for bed. The kids didn't complain. They just walked up the stairs in single file and went to their bedroom. I put them in their pajamas and got them ready for bed. Then I tucked them in, kissed them all goodnight, and switched out the lights. When I came back down, I was bored and had absolutely nothing to do, so I decided to watch a movie. I looked through the family's DVD collection, but all they had were cartoons and Disney movies. I wasn't in the mood for any more kids' stuff. On the bottom shelf, I spotted some old VHS tapes. One of them had a strange title. It was M Girls. This seemed rather curious, so I decided to take a look at it. I put the videotape in the VCR and pressed play, then sat down on the sofa and made myself comfortable while the video started. The first thing I noticed was that it was a home video. The family must have recorded it themselves. The parents and children were all laughing and looking like they were having fun. I was about to turn it off when I happened to notice someone else in the video. It was a girl who looked like she was in her late teens. It seemed like she was the previous babysitter. She looked very familiar. It seemed like I recognized her from somewhere. Perhaps she went to my school? Then it finally hit me. Oh my freaking God! It was the missing girl from the news report. My hands were shaking. My whole body was trembling. I just wanted to get out of there as fast as possible. I jumped out of my seat, ejected the video, and put it back in its case.
Then I remembered the jars in the refrigerator. I had to see what was in those jars. With a shudder, I went to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. Maybe I'm just overreacting, I thought. I reached and took out the second jar, peeled back the brown paper wrapper. I could see long pale hunks of meat and strips of fat floating in the red liquid. Some of the meat looked like it had skin on it. Human skin. I could also see what looked like strands of hair. Long hair. Human hair. I was so scared. I felt like I was about to pee my pants. I ripped off the rubber band that was sealing the jars and peered inside. There was an eyeball staring back at me. Horrified, I dropped the jar and it smashed on the kitchen floor. I ran to the living room, put on my jacket, grabbed the videotape and stuffed it into my pocket. When I came out of the hallway, Sebastian was standing at the foot of the stairs. "Where are you going?" he asked. I just remembered," I stammered. "I forgot something. I have to go home and get it. I'll be back in a few minutes." Damien and Lenka came running down the stairs. "You can't go," screeched Damien. "You can't leave us on our own." "I'm calling our parents," shouted Lenka as she picked up the phone and began dialing numbers. Sebastian grabbed hold of my leg and wouldn't let go. "You have to stay," he squealed. "We're hungry." His grip was extremely tight, but I managed to shake him off and ran out the front door. As I dashed to my car, I saw the parents pulling into the driveway. I didn't stop for a moment. I just jumped into my car and locked all the doors. The children were on the doorstep screaming and crying. The mother and father got out of their car and they came running over. There was an angry look on their faces. "What's wrong?" they shouted. "Where are you going? Come back here!" I didn't answer. I just turned the key in the ignition and revved the engine. They started banging on the windows. I floored the accelerator and tore out of there like a bat out of hell and never looked back. I didn't stop until I came to the police station. I told the police officers everything I knew and handed over the videotape as evidence. The police immediately dispatched 2 patrol cars. By the time they arrived at the house, the parents and children were gone. They just took their car and disappeared. The police searched the house and found the jars in the refrigerator. They also found human flesh and bones in the basement. They did tests and confirmed that these were the remains of the missing girl. They never managed to track down the parents of the children. They're still out there somewhere. Probably living under a different name. Probably still on the hunt for new victims. If you want my advice, be careful who you are babysitting for.
My name is Jack. I am my mom's boy. When I was 5 years old, my parents got separated. I remember they had a very toxic relationship. My father used to drink wine and beat my mom with sticks. I was too small at the time. I couldn't help my mom in those situations. One day I told my mom that let's start a new life and run away from the difficult one. "Can you live without a father?" she asked me. "Mom, you are enough for me," I told her. Soon my parents got separated. We bought a new house in another town. We began living the happiest days of our lives. She used to work late at night, so sometimes I had to wait for her. One night she called me and told me, "Listen, my sweetheart, I will be late today. There's some more work which I have to finish tonight, so don't worry." My mom told me and she hung the phone. It was a stormy night. I closed the door of the house. I came back to my room. It was thundering. I heard someone knocking at the door. When I was a kid and it was nighttime, I was not supposed to open the door. I went close to the door and asked, "Who's there?" The man standing behind the door replied, "Please open the door." I got scared and didn't say anything. He stood there and again called me, "Son, I'm your father." I got shocked after hearing him. "But you don't sound like my father," I replied. "Son, I know. You don't like me. I did wrong with you and your mom. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Open the door," he screamed at me. I was sweating. I wanted to see the man. I looked at him through the peephole. I could see my father, but barely recognize him. His face was pale. The red eyes scared the hell out of me. My head was throbbing with fear. I was not able to move. The man started banging on the door. "Open the door, you son of a bitch!" he screamed. I could see my dad's face turn devilish. I was so scared I peed in my pants. The man slowly went back and disappeared into the darkness. I stood there for a long time. When my mom arrived, I told her about this. My mom told me that it was a bad dream because my father passed away last year because of an overdose of drugs, but I knew it was not a dream.
Everyone has their own plan for summer vacation. Some people go for tours, some visit their loved ones. But for me, it's my grandmother's town. When I was little, I used to go there every vacation. That place was filled with beautiful trees and landscapes. Tree climbing had always been one of my favorite things to do. It didn't matter how tall they were. As long as they were trees, I could climb them. My personal record for reaching the top of a tree was 60 seconds, which probably isn't that impressive. But for me at the time, I was proud of that. One summer vacation when I was 11, I'd always climb this one tree in our front yard and then swing on it for hours. But one nightmarish incident made me stay away from trees from that point on. It started like any other day. I went out to the front yard after breakfast, ready to do some climbing as usual. I kicked off my shoes and took off my socks since I was more adept at climbing while barefoot. Then I made my way up the tree trunk and grabbed onto the lowest branch I could. Closing my eyes, I decided to just dangle there in the air, enjoying the wind brushing against my face. After 5 minutes, I heard something digging into the tree trunk below me. I looked down, and to my surprise, I saw a bald man with gray skin and a black coat sitting cross-legged at the base of the tree. At least, it looked like a man. With his sharp nails, he was etching something into the tree, but I couldn't see what it was. Instead of calling out for my grandma, I stupidly asked him, "Do you need any help?" The man looked up at me with his orange eyes and smiled, almost as if he were happy I acknowledged his existence. Then his smile grew wider, revealing his razor-sharp teeth.
"Calm down now, or I'll come up and get you."
My face went pale after seeing this guy's monstrous teeth, and I just froze. Clinging to the branch a little tighter while my bare feet dangled above his head. Whoever this guy was, he wasn't human. I snapped out of my daze when the man stood up and began reaching for my legs with his inhumanly long arms. I quickly brought my legs up over the branch, then started climbing for my life. After climbing halfway up the tree, I looked down to see if he was still there, but he was gone. Not a single trace was left of him. Suddenly, 2 large hands grabbed both of my ankles, pulling my feet from under me and causing me to fall on my back. Before I knew it, I was hoisted into the air, dangling upside down by my feet. I frantically looked up to see the creature's horrifying face smiling down at me. I don't know how it reached the top before I did. I didn't even see it pass me. This thing's movements defied logic.
"I win.
It said while licking its teeth.
Now for my prize."
The creature then opened its mouth inhumanly wide, revealing hundreds of sharp teeth. It then slowly brought my feet up to its open maw, ready to devour me. I screamed at the top of my lungs as I kicked my legs frantically, trying to free myself, but to no avail. I was only saved when my grandma came outside after I screamed. The creature quickly dropped me before disappearing without a trace, almost as if it never existed. I got out of that tree so fast and ran straight into my grandmother's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. I tried to explain to her what I'd seen, but she didn't believe me. Years have passed since then. A shiver runs up my spine whenever my friends plan for summer vacation. I'll never forget that thing's face for as long as I live.